Hi guys, great to be with you again. Tariq, Panja, New York Times man out in Istanbul at the moment. Graham Dunbar, Associated Press legend in Geneva. Um, Martyn Ziegler, Leeds.
Marhaba, marhaba, everyone from Istanbul. Ziggs, you're sounding much better than you did last week. You feel like a new man?
Yeah, the apologies to my for my croakiness last week to anyone who listened. It's much better now. Thank you very much. So how's Istanbul? You've been for the European Club Association. You're sort of after your sort of fairly hard hitting story about Nasser El Khalifi, Tariq. Any angry glances from across the Bosphorus aimed at you?
No, no, everyone's very polite, very nice, clubbable atmosphere here at the ECA General Assembly. I'll tell you what, though, everything is ridiculously lavish whenever there's something in Turkey. I don't know if you guys found it last time, but they've had to two different five-star hotels have had to host themselves. And obviously, just to caveat, I'm obviously not staying at one of those. But the delegates they got some a different five-star hotel for the plenary meetings, and I'm talking to you today from what I'm told is a former Ottoman palace where where they've held a general assembly. So you see these fellas, really high ceilings, so good for someone like Edwin van der Sar. But yeah, it's just so ornate and so opulent, and it's essentially a pro forma football meeting. It reminds me of. Do you remember the old days, Graham, when following the collapse of FIFA, football was going to enter into this new austere period? No more of these luxury cars, luxury hotels. That feels like such a long time ago now.
No, the ECA does not do anything but lavish hotels. I mean, you're in Istanbul now. Congratulations for that. But throughout its 14-year existence, the ECA's September meeting was always in Geneva. All was great for me, and for about the last 10 years at a lakeside hotel in Geneva, where I think the most expensive coffee I've ever bought in this job, because we do spend a bit too much time in five-star hotels. But the most expensive coffee ever was at the Hotel Wilson on the banks of Lake Geneva, and that's the sort of standard that's set for these ECA meetings. But how much business is being done in public or in private this
Not
week?
much done in public, if I'm honest. Tell you was here though. So you've got the obviously the European Club Association's group of the top clubs, but there were a few representatives that of note. Victor Montagliani, head of CONCACAF, was here. He's also on the FIFA stakeholders committee, so that panel that's responsible for kind of a lot of the big decisions on the transfer market, but the calendar and all the kind of relationships with the rest of football. He was here and was quite visible and chatting to people. But also, I noticed Patrice Motsepe, the head of CAF, was here. The billionaire head of CAF. He didn't really want to rub shoulders with the oi polloi. I don't think I saw him dashing off for meetings with the ECA chairman Nasser Al Khalifi and a few others. Small delegation from UEFA was here. Giorgio Marchetti, who people may know as the guy responsible for organising the Champions League draw and their calendar expert and the guy who puts together a lot of the new format for the Champions League. He was here. The head of legal, Julian Zilberstein, was here, and head of probably for these guys, head of commercial was here. Gilaron Epstein giving them an update on these Champions League TV sales, which are going at a good clip. We talked about that US sale a while back. Good results elsewhere too. But you guys, the meeting was kind of overlaid with that story or those stories about potential four-team tournament instead of the European Super Cup as a curtain raiser to the European season, perhaps staged in the US. That's what the reports are saying, and elsewhere. Um, did you see those? What did you think of those reports? And then I'll give you a bit of a color on what was discussed here about that.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, the sort of ideas that you could have American clubs involved in this sort of have some sort of preliminary tournament in the States. I mean, I think a lot of these sort of tours, there's people, the clubs do it for the money, a bit of a warm up for the players, but no one takes it particularly seriously, and they're not particularly lucrative. I don't think. I think they're fairly lucrative, but not massively. And if this is a way of making more money, of course they're going to do it.
Yeah, there's always a mission to extract more value from these games, and the Super Cup as it is doesn't attract much attention. I mean, I think for fans of clubs who are not involved say, well, you're going to the US anyway, knock yourself out or play one of those. They're not genuinely competitive games, and if it makes the clubs feel a bit happier, if it does get a bit more revenue for them, then go for it. But yeah, pre-season, not during the season. Let's not distract from the genuine competitive games.
Yeah, bit of colour on that is that US tender for the 24 to 28 Champions League and European club competition season that we talked about. It raised Martyn, what was the figure there? The US sales, I think it was a record of some kind, right?
Yeah, billions.
Right.
Hundreds of millions.
Millions. Right. hundreds of millions, whatever. So the number is not that important. What I'm about to say is in the tender that was sent out to those companies, there was this caveated element that said there is a potential option of a 4-team tournament that will be added into this. So it's not like a pie in the sky, like where's this come from? It's actually in the tender, and people talked about it for since last May, since May. To be honest, what did potentially frustrate people is this idea that there'd be a random MLS team included in it as well. No one knows where that came from. And looking at people from CONCACAF here, I mentioned that was a kind of potential bone of contention. They wanted to see how far down the road this thing is and why they hadn't been consulted on it, because it's football landing on their turf from outside during this season and taking the revenues. While there's a court case going on between Relevant, the organisers of potentially this new competition, and CONCACAF and US soccer in the States because of the games they wanted to do with La Liga. So all fiendishly complicated, but nothing's going to be decided yet. To be honest with you, it's not bad to debate these things, is it?
No, it's not at all. But I mean, it does seem to mean yet more matches. But
Exactly.
the one thing interesting that sort of come out this week is that the European Championships, the UEFA's Euros, everyone expected it was going to go up from 24 to 32 teams. Now, the sort of working group party who've been looking at that are going to say no, keep it at 24, because otherwise the qualifying competition is going to be sort of meaningless and unattractive to broadcasters. So, Graham, can you remember the last time a football competition didn't expand?
Well, the euro itself expanded not so long ago, but this. I think we can look back a year for a hint of where this decision came from. That when the biennial World Cup was being discussed, FIFA was also discussing, limiting the number of international call-ups and wanting to play this block of national team games in October. And part of the plan they were talking about then was a limit on 4 team groups for qualifying. So you play 6 games, that's it, you're done. Well, these 14 groups, they don't work for the small to medium-sized UEFA member federations. You can imagine teams like Slovenia, Northern Ireland, Moldova. They need the guarantees of 4 or 5 home games they get in the current Euros qualifying system. And those games to be spread out during the year to engage with the fans, with the sponsors. And that's and UEFA has to listen to its members for that. So I think, a 32-team Euro with qualification, a given for so many teams, just devalues it so much that just doesn't work for the majority of UEFA members.
Probably no candidate opposing the UEFA president when he comes for election as well, I guess. But the other thing I've noticed or picked up while I'm here, there's that big debate, a really important debate about what the future of the football calendar is going to look like. It's been going for years, rumbling on. And I don't think we're going to get a resolution for some months. But after that presentation from Wenger and Biennial World Cup and everything else, I've got a feeling that we're going to be almost, after all of this, in pretty much exactly the same boat. These international windows are going to be 4 or 5 as they currently are at the moment. Because I was talking to someone, one thing they noticed is during the pandemic, you had to have these triple or quadruple headers. And in some parts of the world, you can't, the players were knackered. It's easy to kind of travel around, like, from Belgium to Germany and England. It's easy. But if you're in like Asia and Africa and places in South America and Central America, it's an absolute nightmare to do this triple header. And imagine having 5 match days. So I think after all of this, we're almost likely to be in exactly the same place with maybe this new Club World Cup competition or whatever. But I think the calendar is going to look very much like it does today after all this.
Interesting. Yeah, it was 2008 that UEFA expanded the Euros from 16 to 24 teams, and actually, one of the sort of key drivers at the time was David Taylor, the late David Taylor, who was Scottish FA chief executive, went on to become UEFA's general secretary. And I remember asking him at the time. I said, "Oh, you've ruined a great competition." And he looked at me and said, "Oh, well, we had to do something to make sure England qualified." Because obviously 2008 they didn't. They missed out that year. Talking about regulation, calendars, all this sort of thing, the Premier League they've got this idea of a new deal for football, which means giving more money, 170 million or so a year to the EFL, and in return they get some calendar changes which they reduce fixture congestion. So no more FA Cup replays, and if you're in European competition, your clubs either don't play in the League Cup, the Carabao Cup as it is now, or you only play under 21 teams, which I think Liverpool did that once when they were involved in the Club World Cup in 2019. It's big changes though. Is this the Premier League getting its way again if it goes through?
Well, I think the Premier League clubs, the ones who can imagine playing in UEFA's European competitions, I mean, they've already put their flag in the ground by expanding all the European competitions from 24 with 8 games instead of 6. So they've already encroached on the available midweeks that there are. And as you say, all competitions, they've all been trying to expand. There's this sort of year zero in 2024 where change was possible. And the clubs who can expect to play new European competition have already stated their priorities, and there will be more European matches. And it's already narrowed the ground for like the League Cup in England. You can see there's going to be pressure on the 20-team leagues to come down to 18. But one of the first big dominoes to fall was expanding the European competitions, and other competitions are having to react to that.
Yeah, and I guess that 170 million in and of itself, yes, it's actually, obviously a big number when you put it in terms like that. But in the context of the enormous sums the Premier League has at its disposal, it can afford that if it gets these concessions in return. I mean, let's not forget that 170 million compares with what 260 million Chelsea spent in a summer transfer window. This is the kind of differential we're talking about, and it's a cost of business that they're willing to accept. You price it in, you get this other stuff which they've been trying to change for some time, Martyn. So, yeah, Premier League getting its own way, of course. Speaking of the Premier League getting its own way, Martyn, you wrote a very interesting story that you do now and again, Martyn. It's true, um, about the independent regulator. What was that?
Yeah, so you love an independent regulator, obviously, Tariq, and you'd have been distressed to learn that Liz Truss's new government is very against regulation generally. So they're not going to push ahead with this white paper for a statutory body like Ofcom, the broadcast regulator. There's not going to be that really. They want football to come up with its own solution. This is a government who's is going to remove the regulation that restricts bankers' bonuses, so it sort of makes sense. And the FA has lost little time. It's put forward its own proposal for a licensing model that would sit, a sort of licensing authority that would sort of sit alongside the FA, have independent directors, would oversee owners, issue licenses to clubs, do any financial regulation, but wouldn't be a sort of a government run appointed body. So I'm not 100% against that FA idea, but do you think it's a retrograde step?
I think a regulator can be good. The system can be good. It just depends on the quality of people, the level of independence they get, and what the conflicts of interest that person might bring, depending on how they come to be appointed. I'm not committed either way until I would see who the person is and the scope of independence they've got.
Yeah, I think that's really well articulated from Graham. That thing about independence is just crucial and quality. You see a lot of these sports bodies outside the UK who have independent members and independent governance guys, and you also see them at they're staying at the same five-star hotel as the people they're regulating. For example, with FIFA, I remember at the World Cup in Russia, the governance guy demanding a suite, for example. So it depends on what people bring to the job. But what I would say, Martin, is why is the FA suddenly waking up now? If it was the governing body and had this regulatory role, what suddenly the FA has decided, yes, we're going to do this licensing thing. We're going to now focus our minds on doing our job. What the hell was it doing for the last few decades?
Well, that's a good question. Maybe I think, but certainly they've always, the sort of power struggle between the Premier League and the FA. They've always been in the last couple of decades. Certainly, they've sort of been in the shadow of the Premier League, and under Richard Scudamore particularly, I think he was like very hard nosed and very anti sort of the FA having any more powers for sure. I think that's changed. We will see. Talking about FAs and problems, Spain's a good. What's happening with the Spanish football?
Well, what isn't happening at Spanish football this year, it seems. This week we had whistleblower reports from the uncle of the Spanish FA president, no less, alleging some shenanigans with hired young ladies at a Spanish FA meeting in the past. This whistleblower who was fired a few weeks ago and has returned in kind. And chaos in the Spain national women's team in the last 24 hours, really, a sort of mutiny among the players. 15 players sort of refusing to play, unhappy with their coach, another man's coach in women's football, which always leaves me feeling a shame when women's national teams do have men coaching them, and Spain, who are going to be presented as Europe's preferred bidder for the 2030 World Cup, really got plenty of issues going on behind the scenes as they're trying to present themselves as as worthy of having the responsibility of hosting a World Cup.
Yeah, the coach, he'd been there since 2015, so that's quite a while. George Vildes, 7 years. I can't say I'm an expert on Spanish women's football, but I do remember the game in the Euros against England. I think it was played in Brighton, a knockout match. And Spain were utterly dominant for the first half, took a one-goal lead, and I think it was commented on at the time. The coach there, he made some very strange changes and completely any momentum Spain had. They looked like they were coasting, to be honest, just disappeared. And that's just that one snapshot of the game. But also, this story is another, as Graham, you mentioned, what's not going on in Spanish football. The Spanish FA president, lightning rod for controversy from the moment he arrived, Luis Rubiales, former player. I think he played it for Rangers at one point briefly in Scotland, and he was a Union man. He replaced Angel Villalona, who was accused of corruption, etc., and all sorts of other misdeeds. Arrived as the clean hands there. As soon as he arrived, do you remember at the World Cup in Russia? He had to exit the FIFA Congress in Moscow halfway through, fly to Krasnodar, and fire the coach at the time because he'd agreed to join Real Madrid, and that's how this fellow's tenure had started. And it's just been rocky and bumpy ever since. There were the leaked tapes, this row with Javier Tebas at La Liga, the deal with Gerard Piqué to sell the Spanish Super Cup to Saudi Arabia. I mean, it goes on and on. Martin, we talked about this. If it happened in well, certainly in England, the guy wouldn't be in place for a week or two. At least, it would be a week and he's gone. This guy seems to be clinging on despite all sorts of episodes under his tenure. And this is just another one.
Yeah, what do you need to do to be sacked from your job as Spanish FA president? Well, so I mean, for sure, it's in terms of the Spanish women, the 15-player mutiny. Are they? Is it? It's not because of the fact that they've been unsuccessful or anything like that, is it? Is it? It's the coach causing them sort of mental health issues or something like that. Is that effectively it?
It seems to be the culture within the squad. Yeah, training sessions, player management, I think tactics as well. Yeah, and 15 is quite a mutiny. This is not just one or two disaffected players who are not being selected. This is a broad sweep of the culture within the squad.
I remember about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe less than that. Villalona, who Rubiales' predecessor, came to London for a conference. I asked him a question about some racist issues in Spanish football and I think some English players, some English clubs have been targeted. And he said at the conference, he said, there is no racist problem in Spanish football. There's no racism in Spanish football. And he just left it at that, which was obviously a stupid thing to say. And highlighted this week that how wrong that was with Vinicius Junior, the Real Madrid player, being targeted by Atletico Madrid fans. A pretty sort of key challenge, I think, for the Spanish football authorities here.
Yeah, I think so. I think the world is watching to see how they react to that. I think if you'd like to think that African federations are looking very much to see how they handle that, to see if this is the kind of federation they would want to support in any World Cup vote for 2030, and a country they want to reward, because we need to see how the Spanish FA handles these kinds of issues if they want to welcome the world in it's just 8 years' time.
Yeah, it was a tawdry affair, Martin, the Vinicius Junior affair. This started with a fellow on El Chiringuito, that Spanish talk show, describing his celebration, which he dances. He said he should stop acting the monkey, which obviously has racial connotations. He denied that, but that led to Atletico Madrid fans barracking Vinicius Junior and calling him a monkey in this highly charged derby last weekend. It's horrific, and it just depends. All eyes on the Spanish FA on what action they take and whether they really want to kind of stamp this out. Do you think on what you're saying, Graham, in terms of voting, do you have confidence that the people who vote for the World Cup, it used to be the Exco, now it's the entire FIFA Congress, so 211 members usually. Do you think they vote with the correct intentions now?
Well, I don't think we learned an awful lot from the vote in 2018 when the choice between the three North Americans against Morocco. And FIFA's intentions were fairly clear then. So that we didn't really learn much about how the quality of voting, what issues would be in play. The 2030 race is looking a lot more intense. a lot more issues playing into that. That could be fascinating. I think we'll learn a lot more about the integrity in that. And another thing on the Spanish, again, the Spanish FA sort of playing politics beyond the issues across Europe this week. We saw the World Cup teams from Europe who are committed to having their captains supporting the One Love campaign to have the rainbow armbands, to wear those in Qatar. Spain and Portugal, 2 of the 13 who didn't join in the campaign. And I'm wondering if that's because they have an eye on not upsetting people and potential voters in Asia for that. But then, but a very interesting campaign launched this week, possibly one that blindsided FIFA quite a bit. That's going to be, an interesting to and fro over the next few weeks, because it will require FIFA to relax what is explicitly said in World Cup regulations, that you just can't go around bringing your own equipment, especially one with a clear kind of political, social message, to the World Cup.
I noticed they tagged it as an anti-discrimination armband rather than a sort of specifically LGBTQ rights one. So I wonder if that must have been a tactical thing. So I mean, I think that they have made FIFA aware. They wrote to them, but they just hadn't received a reply back. I mean, I think everybody involved, from all I've spoken to a couple of the national associations involved in this, they would certainly be amazed if FIFA blocked it, and I think it would be hugely embarrassing for FIFA if they did try to do it. If it was just one country, they'd probably say no, but as it's 9, 7 of which are in the World Cup, and it's not just the British, is it? It's the Dutch. It was their idea first, and I think UEFA has already given them permission to wear them in the Nations League. So it would be pretty embarrassing, I think, for FIFA if they blocked it. What do you think, Tariq?
Yeah.
Any chance?
Oh, no, well, look, a couple of thoughts. One, you mentioned Martin. I think they're treading a fine line here. These aren't this great gesture from these FAs. It's now, we've known about these issues since Qatar got hosting rights in 2010. The pressure from fans, activist groups, etc. There's a lot of constituencies they're trying to please here. As you just said there, that this flag is this interesting logo, One Love. It's not a flag I'm particularly familiar with, but it isn't the rainbow flag that the LGBTQ community obviously identify with, and one that is very sensitive in Qatar. So it's not that one. It's something kind of betwixt and between. They're kind of hewing this line in order to appease this constituency at home and not offending the hosts in Qatar, and this kind of this dance everybody's doing. And then on the second point, do I think FIFA is going to do anything? I don't think so. And again, I think that the choreography here is very interesting. As you said, it's not 1, it's 9. So that's all these 7 World Cup participants together, 7 for now, maybe others later, that they're all going to do it. FIFA are going to say, well, look, this is a collective action. And why I say that is, do you remember when Russia were barred from playing in the World Cup and European qualifiers? The rationale from FIFA at CAS and everywhere else was it's going to be disruptive to our tournament because all of these teams together are saying they're not going to play them. I think that this idea that they've all grouped together is for this reason. It also probably gets FIFA out of a jam. Graham, there was another armband, wasn't there? Didn't Andrei Shevchenko present Robert Lewandowski, the Polish captain, with a Ukrainian armband that he said he's going to travel to Qatar with? Well, if this armband is now okay, is that one okay too?
Yeah, this is another interesting one because Poland, one of the 5 European World Cup teams who didn't sign up to One Love, but they got ahead of that announcement by the day before, having a photo opportunity between Robert Lewandowski, Poland captain, and Andrei Shevchenko. Shevchenko handed him over an armband in the blue, by now very familiar blue and yellow colours of the Ukraine flag. But again, it was again, threading the needle. Shevchenko said he would be taking the armband with him to Qatar without explicitly saying he would wear it or he would try to wear it, because that would seem to be an explicitly political gesture. But it set the stage for, the One Love armband the next day. But Lewandowski, this seems to be a very genuine feeling that he has to support Ukraine, because even before FIFA and UEFA banned Russia on Russian teams February 28th, so only 4 days after the invasion started, within 2 days of the invasion, Lewandowski said, we can't ignore what's happening. Poland was due to play Russia in the World Cup playoffs a month later, and Lewandowski was already saying, remember, two-time defending FIFA Player of the Year, he didn't want to play. He wasn't going to play. So this seems to be a genuine emotion, but we are seeing elements of when there's player power, collective action as well. It does get results.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we move away from football, guys? Some interesting Olympic stories from one of my colleagues, Matt Lawton. He's spoken to a whistleblower from South Korea. I mean, this is sort of historic, both historic and more recent. But that, for example, the World Taekwondo Federation paid bribes in order to get Olympic status. That's one thing, and the second is that the basically that I think this won't come as a surprise to anybody, but that quite a few Olympic boxing matches were effectively fixed by
Really?
payments.
Boxing at the Olympics? No. Fixed.
But interestingly, one of the stories I quite like is that somebody was visited. The whistleblower had a fairly high position in boxing. He was visited by somebody from one of the delegations who gave he didn't say anything, just gave him a book and an Olympic photo book, and he didn't say anything. And several days later, I was flicking through the book and found an envelope taped to the back containing like thousands of dollars in bills.
Martyn,
Yeah.
Martyn, I need to correct you there because the anecdote is incredible. This book, according to your pal's story, was enormous. It was huge. It's one of these enormous tomes, and he was packing to go home. And he said, "There is absolutely no way I can travel back with this book." So he called an aide into his room, and he said, "Look, I don't know what to do with this book. Just take the book." And then the guy called him a few minutes later to say, "Have you opened the book? Did you see there was an envelope in there?" And he came back, and there was $20,000. It's like holy crap! And according to the whistleblower, I mean, who knows? He handed this cash back. I think incredible.
Incredible, yeah. I thought the IOC's response to it was fairly lame, actually. So that they sort of questioned the veracity of the claims. I mean, Ho Kim, the whistleblower, he worked for CK Wu, who's been the former head of international boxing. I think he's no longer, he's persona non grata, as is the Kim, not Ho Kim, but Kim, the original IOC member and head of World Taekwondo, who himself has served time in prison for fraud and corruption. So I think it's not. You wouldn't say it's beyond the bounds of credulity that he paid money to get Taekwondo into sport.
Well, certainly not back in the day when it happened, around the time of Salt Lake City, and we saw a few years later, and when London was a candidate, that BBC Panorama investigation showed there were IOC members more than happy to be negotiating for money then. I mean, I thought the IOC's response this week to Matt Lawton, so again, incredibly disingenuous, because the IOC, some of the allegations against IBA were around, and again broadcast by the BBC before the London Olympics, and the IOC shut that one down. But their comment this week was, well, Ho Kim, he's persona non grata within the movement. It's true, he's had a colourful career, but also he didn't contact the IOC Ethics Commission, as if somehow if he had, anything would have happened. Because, we all know all the allegations that attach to the IOC, to vote buying and all the rest of it. None of it has been investigated or established by the IOC Ethics Commission. They just do minimal mop-up duty afterwards. So the idea that had the IOC Ethics Commission known, this is not an independent organisation. It can't take on its own investigations. It can't order sanctions. It's a little bit disingenuous to say, if only the IOC Ethics Commission had been told we could do something.
Yeah, the talking of the IOC Ethics Board, it did remind me to fire an email across to the IOC to say, is the IOC Ethics Commission investigation into Pat Hickey, the Irish former IOC member who was arrested in Rio in 2016, has that been closed? No, that's still open. 6 years on, still open. Yeah.
Also, guys, taekwondo, the world of taekwondo as well is not a place for the faint-hearted. I I ended up covering a bit of it at the Tokyo Olympics because there's a female Iranian athlete who was almost this great story of winning a gold medal there. I think she got into the final or something like this. I remember I was coming back from the loo and bumped into the head of international taekwondo. And I said, look, this is a really interesting story with this Iranian athlete. And he said, yes, really interesting. Maybe not as interesting as her opponent, who I couldn't remember. I said, why is that? He said, well, her coach was murdered last week. And I said, wow, that's insane. What happened here? And he goes, he put up his arm. He said it was a taekwondo dispute in Uzbekistan. And I said, well, what does that mean? He goes, yes, it's tragic. He said he expected to fight with this guy in the street, but he didn't know. They thought they were going to fight in a taekwondo fashion, and the guy stabbed him to death the days before the Olympics. So I got back to my seat shaken, trying to cover this Olympics, having heard this guy tell this story. Yeah, not a sport for the faint-hearted at all.
Someone's been watching too much Indiana Jones, I think.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. Well, I think the whole boxing thing and the Olympics is, what's going to happen with that. I think that's going to run until Paris, isn't they? Because the International Boxing Association, the new body, is unhappy that it's IOC is taking control of the qualifiers away from it. But this is an organisation also that's run by a guy who's refusing to, a Russian guy who's refusing to stop Gazprom being, funding it effectively. So there's lots of issues around there, aren't there?
And the election is on Sunday. The second election with the Russian Kremlin against the Dutch candidate, who, if not being explicitly supported by the IOC, clearly I think they would prefer to win and maybe put boxing back on some kind of path to acceptance in the Olympic family. Because as things stand, boxing won't be at the Los Angeles Olympics in 2028.
Do you think part of the reason quite a lot of this happens in loads of these sports at the Olympics is, apart from during the Olympics, no one's really paying attention, certainly not to the governance of, name your minor sport. I remember I had contact from someone from diving saying there's a great scandal in diving related to favourable treatment to the Chinese. There was a vice president from China, I don't know if she's still there, who broke the rules by coaching on the sidelines, etc. And again, it wasn't in the Olympics. And I'll be honest with you, it's very hard to generate interest and focus on these sports. And I think outside of that time, and perhaps that's how quite a lot of this happens, because no one's really looking. So if you want to put a book with 20 grand in it and hand it over to someone, or in exchange for a dodgy boxing result, it's only 2 or 3 people watching. And there's been this kind of culture of impunity for so long that, on it goes. I mean, this story only came out, I think Matt went to Seoul, Matt Lawton went to Seoul, Ho Kim wanted to tell his story, and there you go. I'm sure there's probably hundreds of other dubious examples of behaviour across Olympic sports. So it's probably up to the IOC, if it really wanted to clean up house, it could. And you two, you've described that, the ethics commission. They're run by Panja Zeppeli for how many years? This opaque world. We talk about FIFA and its ethics committee, or UEFA's regulations, but geez, the IOC, we've got nothing on them.
Well, I mean, one name is worth mentioning at this point is the IOC Ethics Commission is not just chaired by anybody. It is chaired by Ban Ki-moon. This is one of his first major jobs after being Secretary General of the United Nations. I don't think he signed up to sort of fly around the world to, Azerbaijan and South Korea or wherever, interviewing random sports officials. It seems he's treated it more as a sort of a figurehead position.
Yeah, Panja, I think she's been there certainly for 20 years. I think she's after the Salt Lake City scandal has been when she was appointed, but I wouldn't say it's been the most rigorous process of weeding out wrongdoers, has it?
Oh, by the way, guys, speaking of kind of strange situations, back to football a little bit. One of the people I bumped into here, I'm not sure he really wanted to talk to me, was the Atletico Madrid president, Gil Marin. And I just wanted to ask him that curious story about Antoine Griezmann, who seems to be only playing 30 minutes at a time. He's substituted, 60th minute, 61st minute, 62nd minute, because of a contractual dispute between Atletico Madrid and Barcelona, meaning that if he plays a certain number of games, or a certain 50% of Atletico Madrid's games, it triggers a 40 million euro payment. It's a crazy situation, and FIFPro have got involved as well, the players' union. So I said, look, what's up here? It's not good for anyone, this, to see this guy. And, talking about transparency and trying to tell people what's happening. I was a bit disappointed with his response. He tried to say, it's up to the coach. I'm looking for the toilet. And then he was off. Not much more clarity there. That would have been that story's run and run. Martin, we talked about that last week.
We did. Yeah, we did. It's an interesting one. I think we may have to use it, actually. Perhaps we should, in future, when Graham's on, if he only comes on for the last 20 minutes, and then we'd have to pay him his enormous fee.
I have to say, I don't want to get too fixated on public toilets this week, but I have to say, when we do spend a lot of time in five-star hotels or these meetings with these people, and there are a lot of septuagenarians among them, if you do want to interview someone that's difficult to get hold of, intercepting the route from the conference room to the toilets and the coffee breaks is usually a very, very successful tactic.
It used to be the smoking area, didn't it?
Yeah, that's a great.
Although I did notice the Borussia, I didn't talk to him, but the Borussia Dortmund CEO, I think he's a smoker. And if you did want an interview, it's not a bad place, that Tariq, because he's got a really long cigarette. I don't know where he gets these cigarettes from. You can probably get 10 minutes out of it.
The inside track on how to get these interviews. I think that's a good place to leave it, guys. Been great talking to you. Speak again soon.